huh? Yeah. Interesting. Wow. That's a whole ball of wax, huh? There's what's left of my power steering fluid. Oh. Are you scared of the road to Angel Fire?
No, it's a good road.
Okay.
It's a windy road. It's a good road.
That's one of the reasons I didn't want to attempt it on my own. Okay, so now I'm connected with a chain. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Angelo.
No problem.
And there's Scout. Oh, and my dogs. Here's hoping nobody escapes out of their crate and stays put. Good news is we only got to go 22 miles. How much trouble could we get in 22 miles? Oh, look at that. So beautiful. No, don't look at that. I'll look at that. You don't look at that. It's gorgeous.
It's very pretty.
But, oh my God.
In a way, the highway widening, I think, ruined a lot of it, but, you know, that's for safety.
Sure.
They've been trying to do that for years.
So, if we encountered somebody going the other way right now, would we have clearance?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Up here, yes. Bridges, no. That's my cool event. So these are tight turns and bridges here.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, I am so glad that we are doing this together. What just a beautiful drive. We have been delivered. So I'm in the yard at my mechanic's in New Mexico, and when you're in towns like this, this is what happens across the way. Here, I'm cheating. I'm not showing you the car next to me. I am in a yard full of old decrepit cars, and I am on a main highway. It's a little noisy, but I spent the night here last night, and it was safe enough. And certainly the views are pretty enough. I'll show you. The only thing is I'm a little out of breath because I've had to work really hard to try to get the RV to be level. And despite my best efforts, I still feel like I'm in a fun house and it's making me a little queasy. So I was thinking, you know, it's not always great. So today sucks. But life is good. That's how I feel about my RV life. Don't misunderstand and think that every day is so great, because some days are just so hard, just like in real life. You gotta admit, if you're gonna be stuck somewhere, it's almost as gorgeous as a campground. Anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit about how I deal with breakdowns on the road. Because Lord knows, I seem to have had so many of them that I'm actually getting really good at this stuff. So, let me tell you a little bit about how I roll when Scout stops rolling. So this last time was a power steering issue that literally, as soon as I drove into the campground, all of a sudden my engine or something was just making this horrible rubbing noise, and the steering was really hard, and I thought, oh no. So I actually was prepared for, 10 to 12 days of boondocking. So I figured, what's the hurry? I found a place to call home. I staked my claim, and I just set up camp literally and sat there for, I think, about 10 days or so. And then I got towed here to the mechanic. So here's what I do when I encounter issues on the road. So the first thing I do, and some of these things are going to seem obvious, but some of them you might not be aware of, and so that's what I'm hoping is I'm giving you the full picture, and roll your eyes at the stuff you already know that is like ultra obvious, and then take notes on the stuff that's like, hey, RoamTownGirl, that's actually not a bad idea. So the first thing I do, obviously, is I will Google mechanics in the area. And when I'm RVing, I seem to be more in remote areas. So it becomes a little bit more challenging, but it all is applicable. So I'll Google, I'll look at reviews. I also will ask. So like in this case, I was at New Mexico State Park, and I actually let the ranger know what was going on, where I was, and I asked him, do you happen to know any mobile mechanics in the area? And it doesn't have to be mobile, but you know, might as well check them all out. And he said he would come check on me in the morning and you know, bring me some information. So I also had that angle going. So I'll use Google, I'll read reviews, and I will always rely on the locals, especially when I'm sitting amongst our other RVers. 9 times out of 10, there are recommendations to be had. And if you're at an RV park, that's even easier. But anyway, grab whoever you can. Go make friends with your neighbors, make friends with the camp host. Just ask anybody. It can't hurt, right? Another place you could go for mechanic recommendations is I'm on a lot of Facebook groups. I don't know if you are, but I have found that those communities have been most helpful in many, many, many ways. And so one of them is I would put it out in a couple of my Facebook groups, and I'd say, anybody know a good mechanic in such and such area? And I don't always get a recommendation, but you know, sometimes I do that a lot when things go wrong, and I'm like, uh-oh, help, SOS. And I don't know, I'm trying to think, I did that recently for something where I had a problem and I put it out there, and then I got inundated with lots and lots of suggestions and recommendations. Oh, I know what it was. My propane tank. Not the last person, but recently I had my propane tanks filled, and I never micromanage those people. I figure they know what they're doing, right? And in this case, the guy didn't, and he filled my tank so full I couldn't even see the needle anymore. And I know it's not supposed to be filled up that much. That's why it has that little bleeder thing. Anyway, I was convinced I was going to blow up, and I didn't know what to do, and I was so panicked. And so I put it out on a bunch of those groups, and people were telling me to go out and do the bleeder valve, which I was afraid to do. But they were like, turn everything on, like turn on your water heater and turn on your furnace, and you know, basically try to burn off a bunch of the propane until I could get back there the next day. And it's so funny because that actually was the one instance where I am so glad that our furnaces are so inefficient because I ran my furnace as opposed to my wave that I'm madly in love with, and I will do a video at that point on all the things I'm madly in love with that I have that make my RVing life so much more convenient and wonderful and happy. But in this case, I was running the furnace, and in the morning I finally saw my needle. It came back into view, and so I didn't have to go back and deal with that. Now, God bless anybody who fills my propane tanks, because now I'm like, do you know, did you do the bleeder valve? Did you do this? Because I don't ever want to be in that position again. But anyway, I just went all the way over here when what I wanted to say is those Facebook communities, the Facebook RV communities have proven to be fantastically wonderful for getting help, and I'm suggesting that you use it to perhaps find a recommended mechanic. Okay, so now you've got some names, look them up, get some reviews, and then what I do is I will call them and find out what their rates are. And here's like the basic things that I ask. To the degree that I know what's wrong, I will tell them what's wrong. I will ask them if I come to, can they accommodate an RV? That's a big one, because sometimes, I don't know, some mechanics think that RVs are a whole nother Oprah, and some mechanics, like the one I'm at right now, is like, it's a Ford van. I don't care what they put on the back end of it. The engine's a Ford engine. So, sometimes you'll run into mechanics who have a little bit of phobias about working on RVs. But hopefully you'll find one, like I always do, who recognize the front end of my RV is just a car. And I have a gas. I don't know if it gets more challenging with the diesel, but especially in these remote areas, I mean, they've got tractors and all kinds of interesting engines. So a good mechanic can work on any kind. So then I'll ask, if the repair isn't done as quickly as we think, because they never are, do you have a place where I can stay in my RV? And sometimes, like in this case, it was like, as long as you're self-contained, sure. A lot of times I've been able to be like in a fenced, parking lot area, and I drag out my extension cord and I have power. So I always ask, because whatever they quote you on time, it never rolls that way. In fact, I came for one repair. It took 5 days to get parts. The repair was made. As soon as we tested it, it blew a hose. Well, part of the same system, but not the initial problem. And now I'm going to be here another few days. So just be prepared. And with that, think boondocking. Make sure you've got water, you've got propane, you've got food. I actually got a little stuck here, and I was running low because I had already been at that campground boondocking for a while. Then I came here. I didn't dump because I couldn't steer. Although hopefully you watched my video about stocking up on water and taking a little bit out of my gray tank, which was very helpful. But at a certain point, I needed to dump. It's also very cold where I am at, which of course I love, but I was running low on propane and I didn't have power. So that was an issue that needed to be addressed, and my food was dwindling. And when I say I'm running out of food, in my case, because I prep, and I haven't done a lot of videos yet on the prepping side of my life, but I have all that, thank God. So I was just sort of digging into my prep food, which means I started eating a bit more chili and pouches of tuna, things of that nature. And of course, I'm going to need to restock that stuff. Okay, so back to how you handle repairs on the road. So that's how you go about, those are my best suggestions about going about finding someone, a mechanic, to help you. The questions to ask. And now here is the stuff that I have learned to do over time. So I have an old guy, and I will identify what are the parts that are needed or going to be needed. Like in this case, I had a leaking seal on my power steering. And the way I found that out was when the ranger came the next day as promised, he sent the tech guy who works for the state parks, I guess. I hope I'm not getting anybody in trouble. And since he's like the mechanic that fixes everything at the local parks in the area, I said, would you mind taking a look? And he's like, no. And he got underneath and he told me what to do. And he came out from underneath and he said, yeah, the seal around the pitman arm of your box is leaking. So when I called mechanics, I was able to say, this is what I think the problem is. And that I was able to identify what parts. Now, I've had a manifold issue. I've had a radiator issue. Now I'm having this power steering issue. And every time I learn a little bit more about how to roll in the mechanics world. So with the radiator, I found out about an online company called Rock Auto. Now, I personally am not happy about the experience I had with them. And I am not a promoter of going and using them and buying things from them because I'm mad at them. I don't like how they treated me. And they have like no customer service, no phone number. It's all online. So it's very aggravating. And that's part of why I was very challenged. I bought a radiator from them. It was defective. I was able to get a second radiator, but it was all online. I couldn't talk to anybody. And what I couldn't get done is, I had to pay a second round of labor on installing the second radiator. I had to rebuy all the fluid, all the transmission fluid or coolant or whatever's in your radiator coolant, right? Anyway, I had to replace all that stuff. And I said, you sold me a defective, in an email, you sold me a defective radiator. I should be reimbursed not only for the radiator, but you should also reimburse me for all these charges I have to do a second time. And they didn't, and so that's why I don't like them. But here's what they are good for, and here's what I'm suggesting you do, is once you know the parts, what I do is I call Ford. I have a Ford, whatever you have. Call a local parts dealership, and I will ask them, can you give me the part number for, in my case, I was either going to need a seal kit for the steering gearbox, or I was going to need a whole new gearbox. So in my case, Scout's 24 years old. Every time I call, the parts are always discontinued, but that's not what we're worried about. We just want the number of the part. Then you can go to Rock Auto and you can put the part number in that you were given, and they will show you the aftermarket parts that are interchangeable. And because Rock Auto has like absolutely no customer support, they have low overhead and they have the best prices. So that can tell you what the fair pricing is for the parts. And I have in the past, I've done it this way when I'm able. I actually will say to the mechanic, may I purchase the parts and then just pay you for labor? And oftentimes I really haven't run into a case yet where that wasn't acceptable. So that's another way to help save money. The issue with me this time is I couldn't drive the RV, so ordering a part, how was I going to get it? So that wasn't going to work. So when you are getting your parts and the mechanic's getting them for you, here's the next tip. So you go to Rock Auto, you look at what are like the best prices on that particular part, and then I looked up what is fair markup. Because of course, your mechanic is not going to charge you just retail what he bought it for. He needs to charge markup. So 25 to 50% is acceptable markup. So take the Rock Auto price, add 25 to 50%, and that should be in alignment with what the mechanic is going to charge you for any particular part. So that's how I roll with the parts. And like in this case, if I had needed a gearbox, he was telling me it was 300 and change. I'm like, what the flip? So I look them up, and sure enough, they're like in the $150, $170 range. When I added an additional 25% onto it, boom, now I'm up in the $300 range. I feel comfortable paying that amount for that part. So I hope that I explained that clearly and concisely. But that's how I do my best to make sure that I feel like I'm not being taken advantage of and gouged. Often because I know this sounds bad, but I'm a girl, I'm blonde, and I think half the time mechanics just think they see me coming. They don't know I've been through this. This ain't my first time at this rodeo, and I'm getting more and more savvy each time. Okay, so that's the parts part. Now let's talk about the labor part. So there is these books, and they actually will tell you how many hours of labor a particular repair should run. Now in this case, I have a little bit of a cheat sheet, and perhaps you can develop your own, which is I have my handyman James that I know you hear me talk about in many of my videos, and I found the most fabulous mechanic in Washington. His name is Rick, and I will go to both of them. I will say, this is what happened. What do you think it is? What parts do you think I need? And I get a little education from them. I said education. A little education from them so that I can speak to the current mechanic with a little bit of knowledge of what's going on. I also am able to ask them, what is the approximate labor time that I should anticipate? I found things online. I'll look up the name because I can't remember. I think it actually was through AutoZone or one of those, where you can literally put in a repair and you can put in a zip code and it will do its best to kind of tell you what the range is of what the parts should be, what the labor should be, and what the overall repair should cost you. I, of course, prefer to go to people I know, but in a pinch, if you don't have that, that is something you can utilize. But make friends. I'm sure y'all have mechanics that you've met in your life, so go back to them as a resource if at all possible. And if nothing else, they are the primo place to get that magic number of what to anticipate for the labor. Now, the other thing is, like I find over and over again, especially in situations like this, I don't really get a written estimate. It's like people in the more remote rural areas don't roll like that. So instead, I'm very verbally concise. So like with this repair with the gearbox, it was, I made him look up in the book and he had told me, I think 2.5 hours or 3.5 hours. And I said, well, what's going to happen if it goes to 6? I said, I don't have unlimited funds. I'm like, can we cap it? Can we cap it? And I got him to agree at 4 hours. I said, great. So if it's 3.5 hours or less, you'll charge me your hourly rate. But if it takes longer, you promise me we'll cap it at 4 hours. I will not have to pay for more than 4 hours of labor. So I know, like, for me, those discussions are a little uncomfortable, but you gotta have them. You just do. I've just learned over time, you can't, this is especially when you don't have the written estimate, you've got to be concise. Okay, so now I've told you about how to find the mechanic, how to get a grip on the parts and the pricing, how to be prepared for the labor, what to do. The other questions to ask, like I said, is, do you have a place for me? If I need to stay, can I stay in my RV in your yard or whatever? I think that kind of covers everything that I wanted to share with you. Yeah, I hope that you've had a good time hanging out with me. I've had a good time hanging out with you. This is actually getting to be more and more fun. So I hope you can say the same on your end. So I have no idea how and when this particular repair is going to be complete. But I've done the best I can to manage the parts of it that I can. And I hope that some of the stories and tips and tricks I've shared with you today help you if you ever find yourself in this poopy part of RV life. If you did have a good time hanging out with me today, be sure to give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, why not? Go ahead, hit the subscribe button. And if you hit the bell notification, then you'll be notified the next time I post one of my wacky videos. So don't forget to have some fun. By the way, watching my videos count. If you have any questions or comments, go have at it. Put them in the comment section below. I always try to do my best to read them and respond, or at the very least, let you know that I have read them. And if it isn't too much to ask, could you tell at least one other person to come check out RoamTownGirl on YouTube? I need all the help I can get growing this channel. Thanks, guys.